Hello folks, it's Dom Lawson here from Metal Hammer magazine. The new issue's out this week, so buy that because it's ace. Welcome to another exhilarating kind of stumble through my pathetic intellect, or lack of it, depending on which you prefer. Anyway, so today I'm going to talk to you about the brand new and absolutely fucking awesome, he said, giving away what he was about to say. So you can just switch off now, actually. It's just fucking awesome. Buy it. The new Orange Goblin album, which is called A Eulogy for the Damned, and it's out on Candlelight Records on the 13th of Feb, or certainly soon, next week, I think. And it's one of those things with a band like Orange Goblin. I always feel that that we sometimes it's very easy to take bands for granted when they're kind of always there, and particularly when they're British bands and they're kind of in your actual physical world, and that you can see them fairly regularly, and then there's something about a band like Orange Goblin that play kind of very honest, unpretentious music, and that kind of have toured a lot and played a lot of festivals and been around a lot. That they kind of become ubiquitous, and people, like I say, take them for granted, which I think is a real shame because I think partly because of the way their story has panned out, they've kind of been overlooked really, and not really celebrated for for how genuinely brilliant they are and have been, consistently over the years. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Orange Goblin was they had a track on. I was dimly aware of when they were called Our Haunted Kingdom, and I certainly heard people mention them. But I think the first time I actually heard them was they had a track called Saruman's Wish on one of the Rise Above compilations, Dark Passages 2 it was called. I think it also had like I Hate God on it, and Pentagram and stuff. It was a great compilation, but the Orange Goblin track really leapt out on me because it had such brilliant energy and it had such a British feel to it, and it's easy to kind of bash on cliches about all this, British heavy metal, but they really are a band that tap into the essence of what British heavy metal's all about, and they do incorporate American influences into what they do, clearly. But the overriding thing is of Sabbath and Priest and Maiden and Motorhead and just the good stuff really. And they're a band that I think, because they've been so straightforward in what they've done, and they've not gone on any kind of ridiculous, pretentious flights of fancy, or done anything kind of particularly experimental over the years, that an new album comes out and people kind of go, oh well, it's another Orange Goblin album. But actually, if you look at their catalogue, it's incredibly strong, and each album's distinct from the other. And particularly in recent times, I think they've been on fire creatively. I think Thieving from the House of God, which came out in, hang on, let me check, 2004, was a brilliant record, and Healing Through Fire, which came out about 3 years after that, was an even better record. And they've really kind of come into their own as songwriters, and I think it was easier to dismiss them in the early days because they kind of emerged from that whole stoner rock thing that kind of booted off in the mid-90s. And the problem with stoner rock was that there was a handful of brilliant bands and then a bunch of absolute dross, people just kind of copying the sound and the style but with no songs and no originality, and it was just wasn't particularly metal. A lot of it was so lightweight, and you don't need 85 different versions of Fu Manchu or Caius. I mean, those bands are fantastic. You can't improve on that. So why just copy them religiously? And I was guilty of that a little bit. I was in a band called Grindstone that did, essentially rip-offs of all those bands. But that's smoking dope for you. It makes you think that you're a creative whiz, when actually you're a fucking dozy twat. But anyway, so here we are in 2011, and Orange Goblin have got a new album called A Eulogy for the Damned. The first thing that strikes you about this album, I think, if you when you get it, is that the artwork it's one of the best album covers I've seen in a long, long, long time. It was created by Jim Bob, who used to be in a band called Taint, who were fantastic. And and it's just amazing. It's just a brilliant heavy metal album cover, very distinctive, and it doesn't, it's not like one of those. I can't remember the fella's name, but the fella that does Baroness's album covers. Like everybody's been using him recently, and you kind of see another one going, and you kind of forget which band it is. But this is very distinctive, and it's got a kind of new Orange Goblin logo, and it's just it's a stunning piece of work. But luckily, to back that up, this is without a doubt the best album that Orange Goblin have ever done. I think it's on a number of levels, really. I mean, firstly, the sound of it sounds huge. It's still raw. It's still very live sounding. They still sound like a band kicking off in a room, which I think is always a good thing. But it's got it's a great mixture of kind of raw aggression and a good solid booming production. It's heavy as hell, and it really, really suits them. I think the second thing that is remarkable about this album, I think, is just that the songwriting there is absolutely an all killer no filler record. There's nothing on it that there's no moments when your attention will whatever the word is. My brain's gone terrible, still jet lagged. When your attention will wander, because it's just, I don't know, this album for me sums up everything that's brilliant about Orange Goblin, and I think they kind of had this kind of stoner rock tag attached to them, and it was never right. They're always a heavy metal band, really, and a heavy metal band with a wide variety of influences. If you talk to any member of the band, they can give you 10 different bands that they're into. And yes, all the obvious stuff's in there too, but there's a bunch of other things in there that they like that that maybe you wouldn't expect to come across in the band because of the way that they're portrayed by the press, I suppose, and by reviewers with probably less musical knowledge than perhaps they should have if they're working in the music journalism world. But anyway, there you go. So it kicks off with Red Tide Rising, which you probably heard. It's like the archetypal Orange Goblin album opener. It's thunderous, it's Sabbathy, it's got a big hook, it's got massive riffs. It's you got to watch the video, that's great too. It's just classic Orange Goblin, and I think it's the perfect way to open this album, really. I'm going to go through the tracks and bore you with it because they're all so distinctive that there's something to say about each of them, really. Stand for Something is the next one, and I spoke to Ben Ward, the singer, recently, and he mentioned that this was partly inspired by All For You by Motorhead, which is from the Rock and Roll album, which is a brilliant Motorhead song, but a very kind of distinctive Motorhead song because Lemmy sings on it, and it's quite a touching sentiment, and this is Orange Goblin's kind of equivalent of that. It's got a real kind of anthemic chorus. It's a definite sing-along. It's a crowd pleaser, but very groovy, very heavy track. And then Acid Trial, the third track, has got a very for those of you that are old bastards like me, you'll recognise a very, very distinct kind of new wave of British heavy metal feel to this song, which is killer. It's really, really good, and it's about kind of all those, crazy hippies experimenting with acid in Haight-Ashbury in the 60s, which is kind of awesome, really, especially if you've done acid. Not that I ever have, anyway. The Filthy Nephew is the next track. Starts off with a brilliant sample from a biker movie, one of those kind of exploitation movies from, I think, the late 60s, called Satan's Sadists, which I haven't seen, and Ben tells me it's brilliant, so I'm going to watch that. But the song itself is very kind of Fu Manchu-like, real driving kind of Fu Manchu style riffs on it. But it's incredibly catchy, and it's got Ben singing. Ben's got such a distinctive voice, and he's really underrated as a singer, I think. He's got such a powerful voice, and it's no one else sounds like him, and in kind of subgenres where, there tends to be a lot of formulaic stuff around, you quite often get a lot of singers that try to sound like John Garcia, or you try and get, people who try and sound like Wino. But with Ben, he's got a very, very distinctive voice, and as a frontman, he's, one of the best around, I think, but it's just, like I say, they're so familiar, and you can bump into them in the pub, and they're not a band that have got airs and graces. So as a result, they kind of get, overlooked, which I think it was a shame. And I think this album will change that. Save Me From Myself, the next track, is another thunderous anthemic tune with a really great kind of southern rock feel to it. It's got a really interesting end to it with lots of backing vocal harmonies and stuff, which again is stuff you might not expect from Orange Goblin, and it also totally suits them. I think that's the brilliant thing. They don't do anything on this album that makes you think, oh, hang on, that doesn't really work. But they do quite a lot of different stuff within their sound. I think it's clever. My favourite track is the next one, which is called The Fog, which is, of course, based on the film, which is based on the James Herbert book. And it starts off with one of those massive, doomy, groovy riffs that's kind of like Cities of Frost from the previous album, that kind of, slow, totally cool Sabbathy kind of riff, and then it's got a lot of stops and starts and changes and tempo shifts and stuff in that one. That's amazing. Then there's a Return to Mars, which is kind of a short, sharp, kind of almost angular kind of instrumental thing. It reminds me a bit of the first Atomic Bitchwax record. It's just really great, tons of energy on that. Then there's Death of Aquarius, which is another stormy one which has got a kind of Bathory-esque part in it. And then there's The Bishop's Wolf, which I believe was written by Martin Millard, the splendid QPR supporting bass player of Orange Goblin, which is again total Sabbath worship. It's quite it's got a hole in the sky kind of vibe to it, but it's brilliant, thunderous, and these are the kind of, classic Orange Goblin songs that you expect, and you want at least 2 or 3 of those on an Orange Goblin album. And then the album ends with a eulogy for the damned, which is arguably the most epic thing that the band have ever done. It's got one of those kind of real kind of repeated hypnotic outros that just, has tons of atmosphere, and it's just, I don't know, just the quality of the songs on this album far exceeds, I think, anything they've done before. The production gives it another layer, and it's just they're a band that deserve props because I guess it's one of those things that they are frequently celebrated as a great live band, and there's no denying that Orange Goblin are a fantastic live band, one of the best live bands in the UK without a doubt. They're one of the, I've been in terrible moods and turned up at Orange Goblin shows and been grinning within seconds of them coming on because they've just got that energy and vibe and that kind of, unapologetic heavy metalness to them, which is just, exactly what you want, really. It's pure beer drinking music, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's something to be celebrated, I think, But their album catalogue has been, I think, overshadowed by their position as as the perception that they're part of the stoner rock thing, by the fact that they're always around. They're not, they're not on a big label that's thrown millions of pounds of money at them to promote their records, and they've just steadily built up a fan base and worked hard, And I think if this is your first experience of Orange Goblin, getting Eulogy for the Damned, then go back and check out the other 6 albums. I think it is because they're all good. They're all great. I mean, there are peaks and troughs, and some are better than others, and all kind of dependent on your taste, I suppose. But they have an incredibly strong catalogue. When you think how long they've been around, it's the best part of 20 years. That's they're an institution now. And it's. I think they should be celebrated, and hopefully this album will be a massive success for them, because I think there's plenty of great British bands playing metal, but Orange Goblin are one of the best of them, and should be kind of regarded as such, I think. And I think it's a shame that other trendier, more easily marketable, more lightweight, creatively bands kind of get pushed by magazines, certain magazines anyway, and in really to the detriment of more kind of long established underground bands, which is essentially what Orange Goblin are. We should celebrate everything, not just the new cool stuff. We should celebrate the bands that have been around for ages and that have really earned the right to be honest, treated in the same breath as the Maidens and Priests and Motorheads, because they've put in 20 years of hard work and made loads of great records. Well, that's the test of a band. If you can last that long and still be picking up new fans and making your best work at this stage, then hats off, and double horn salutes all round, really. So there you go, Orange Goblin, the Eulogy for the Damned. It's out next week, I think, on Candlelight Records. Certainly out this month. It's a fucking brilliant British heavy metal album. Best thing the band have done. I urge you to buy it. Please buy a copy. Preferably a compact disc, which is a format we used to have in the old days, which some of you will remember and some of you won't. But yeah, support Orange Goblin because they're fucking awesome. And obviously we'll hopefully see them live very soon, festivals, all that kind of stuff this year, because some of these new songs are going to absolutely destroy live, I guarantee it. So there you go. As you can probably tell, I'm quite a fan of Orange Goblin. So it's my PR pitch for the week sorted. But anyway, it's a fantastic record, so please buy it. And I'll do another one of these things next time I find my brain functioning in an acceptable manner. Cheers, heavy metal. See you soon.